thinking to wrap up the Shabbat, and this one promises to be a little bit of fun. And then next week, we're going to be moving forward towards Independence Day. This is the wave. We're talking first about the wave of the, I said Ladino, I said for the Enki Elohim Ladino, the Sephardic wave. And then next week, the German wave. And then we'll wrap up with the Russian wave. And then I realized we also had a second German wave, and I'm going to deal with that one later on, which is maybe more powerful than anybody realized. And nobody recognizes that second German wave during World War II, before and after. So we come to the foundations of American Judaism. That's my theme. Oh, now I'm going back to screen share. Sorry. All right, and here we are. So, Jews of the first century, rascals, exemplars, and then we'll get into Yekas later. So the founding fathers are really excited about opening the doors to all religions. They're excited about it. They say, we want Mohammedans, we want atheists, Jews, welcome everybody, but they really didn't know what to make of Jews. And remember, these are the Sephardic Jews who were very westernized. Let's not talk about the Hasidic Jews that come later. That's an absolute big elephant to swallow. This one, the Sephardic Jews, they don't know how to digest them yet. So Jefferson corresponds with several people, and he writes about Jews, of the Jewish people, such. Their system was deism, that is a belief in only one God. By the way, in that period, we have a split in the theory of theology of theism and deism. Theism, where you have an active God; deism, where you have God as the divine clockmaker, makes the perfect clocks and let it wind. And so Jefferson puts it in that category. There's a belief in only one God, but their ideas of him and his attributes are degrading and injurious. Their ethics were not only imperfect, but irreconcilable with the sound dictates of reason and morality, as they respect intercourse with those around us, and repulsive and antisocial as respecting other nations. They need reformation, therefore, in an eminent degree. Elsewhere, Jefferson attacked Jewish theology, supposed the God of infinite justice to punish the sins of the fathers on the children of the third and fourth generation. He's reading the Bible, right? Reading what Moses wrote. And then he writes to John, he's writing to John Adams, also on this back and forth. He's quoting an academic about this, to compare the morals of the Old with those of the New Testament. And he goes on and quotes the scholar who he appreciates, Enfield, and he concludes in these words. This is not Jefferson, but he's quoting him approvingly. Ethics was so little studied among the Jews that their whole compilation called the Talmud, there's only one treatise on moral subjects, that's the Pirkei Avot. Talmud goes on and on. What a wretched depravity of sentiment and manners must have prevailed before such corrupt maxims could have obtained credit. It's impossible to collect from these writings a consistent series of moral doctrine. Of course, what he doesn't realize, and what this Enfield doesn't realize, is that, Pirkei Avot is just one little book, but if you go through every other page in that other thousands of pages of the Talmud, there are lots of moral dictates in it. I will take another generation of Protestant scholars to teach the Protestant world, and the great Protestant scholars who begin to teach Judaism to the Protestant world. Actually, the century, but it takes another century. So, on the other hand, you see this contradiction. Jefferson likes Jews as individuals. The Jews he meets are not like the things that he reads in theory. So he gives a blessing to the opening of the synagogue, Mikveh Israel in Savannah, Georgia. And he writes to the preacher, De La Mota, he's happy in the restoration of the Jews, particularly to their social rights, and hopes they will be seen taking their seats on the branches of science as preparatory to their doing the same at the Board of Government. In other words, he understands the Jews have been kept out of the academic world. I'm one of these Georgian plantation owners, Virginia plantation owners, right, descendant of English nobility. So I've had all this available to me. I understand Jews have been locked out of it. So now we're opening the doors. We hope you'll be able to take advantage of it. And then John Adams was communicating with him. And later on, at the beginning, they were enemies. They later on became friends. he would become one of the early supporters of Zionism, before Zionism. So in 1808, he criticizes Voltaire. Voltaire, the great French philosopher of the Enlightenment and liberal, the opening of the doors, hates Jews very bitterly. And my father explained to me it was because he got a bad deal from a Jewish jeweler, and he held it against us ever since. So Voltaire, he criticizes Voltaire. How is it possible he should represent the Jews in such a contemptible light? They're the most glorious nation that ever inhabited the earth. The Romans and the empire but a bauble in the comparison of the Jews. They have given religion to 3/4 of the globe and have influenced the affairs of mankind more and more happily than any other nation, ancient or modern. Right? So, very good. And then to Mordechai, yeah.
Zionism in this sense is a figure of speech because
It's not a political move, right? But it's like
not even a national move, not even a
yeah.
conscious.
There is what we call, it's termed Christian Zionism before there's a Jewish Zionism. The Christians are very much aware of the
Zion,
they wouldn't use the word Zionism. That comes much later. But it's this trend of thought. Yeah. So that's why we talk about Zionism before Zionism. Yeah. Chover Zion is right. It's 2 decades before it's yeah. Yeah, Zogner.
Kazimierz Wielki, Casimir the Great, imported the Jews, and he let them in.
Yeah, to
That's
build
when the Jews came to Poland.
Poland. Yeah, and Poland became the great power of Europe after that. Just as a few centuries later, the Suleiman the Great brought the Jews into the Ottoman Empire, which helped also strengthen the Ottoman Empire. But then, like all good things, they get misused. So, and also Adams to Mordecai Manuel Noah, I'll talk more about him later, the sheriff of New York City. And again, one of the early Zionists, and this is why he talks with him. Noah sent Adams a copy of his book, Travels in England, France, Spain, and the Barbary States. Barbary States meaning North Africa. From Berbers, I guess. Maybe that's this one. Further, I could find it in my heart to wish that you had been at the head of 100,000 Israelites and marching with them into Judea and making a conquest of that country and restoring your nation to the dominion of it. For I really wish the Jews again in Judea an independent nation. If that's not Zionism, nothing is, right? So again, like I said, not that wordy. But even Adams was so enamored of Jews, even he would say, I believe that once restored to an independent government and no longer persecuted, they, Jews, would soon wear away some of the asperities and peculiarities of their character and possibly in time become liberal Unitarian Christians. For your Jehovah is our Jehovah, and your God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is our God. Remember that the liberal Christians of that period were no longer believing in Jesus in the sense of the mystic figure who dies and reborn. No, they're looking at Jesus only as a moral figure. They were close. They're essentially Unitarians without using that term, and he's using it that way.
The Jews serve their agendas.
It's not. He's not the Bible thumping Baptist type. We want the Jew as this liberal image of enlightened thinking that we want for everybody. And so some of these weird things you Jews got about being separate from everybody sort of don't jive with us, right? Because you say we got more in common, but you still have to move up a level, right? That's how Americans looked at Jews. So Americans kept still some of the old world assumptions about Jews, right? During the Civil War, General Grant tried to cut off supplies and funding to the rebel Confederacy, especially in the cotton trade. He tried to ban all peddlers from the areas of his control. So in reference to Jewish traders, trade was a very Jewish business, peddlers, right? Went in, you took a needle and a thread, you walked from house to house, and that's how you then bought a horse, and then you bought a cart, and then you bought Macy's or Woolworth, right? Then we'll get to that. So talking about Jewish traders, Grant said they come in with their carpet sacks. Remember carpetbaggers? The same idea. In spite of all that can be done to prevent it, the Jews seem to be a privileged class that can travel anywhere. They will land at any woodyard or landing on the river and make their way through the country. If not permitted to buy cotton themselves, they'll act as agents for someone else who will be at a military post with a treasury permit to receive cotton and pay for it in treasury notes, which the Jews will buy up an agreed rate, paying gold. He's really mad at these traders. And he's lambasting all Jews under this label. And there probably were a lot of Jews in the business, but non-Jews in the business. Everybody was smuggling. So he declared, though, 17th of December, Oxford, Mississippi, Department of Tennessee, the Jews as a class, violating every regulation of trade established by the Department of Treasury and Department orders hereby expelled from the department. So in the case of expulsion, mass expulsion of Jews. Within 24 hours from the receipt of this order by post commanders, they will see that all this class of people be furnished passes and required to leave, and anyone returning after such notification will be arrested and held in confinement till opportunity occurs of sending them out as prisoners unless furnished with permits from headquarters. It sounds like the Japanese at Manzanar. Pull them, right? Remove them from all areas. There's a suspicion that he really was upset because his father was involved in this trade and got shafted by some of his Jewish partners. That's that suspicion. In any event, it caused an uproar. Jewish officers in the Union Army threatened to resign. It became political football. Lincoln ordered this immediately rescinded. Grant soon ate his own words, apologizing that it was his aide's fault for writing this, not me. I didn't write it. My aide wrote it. Right. Okay. In history, later on, very interestingly, Grant would become friends with the Jewish community. It would shift. And he appointed the largest number of Jews to government positions until his day. Shifting. So, but this was a time also of very unusual Jews, adventurers, such as this character. Notorious pirate and privateer Jean Lafitte. I'm not aware of it, but piracy in the Caribbean was a large, heavy Jewish hand in it. Primarily Spanish Jews, Jews of Spanish descent, who took it upon themselves to take vengeance upon the Spanish. And many of them were leaders in knocking out Spanish ships. They felt their payback. Here we go. Okay, so here we go. Right, this is like we come into our century. We got the Kosher Nostra. What's the Bugsy Siegels crowd and the Mierlansky crowd? Well, we got a version going in that period too. So this is the dread Jewish pirate Jean Lafitte. One Jewish pirate proved to be genuine Jean Lafitte, born in 1780 and died around 1823. And he himself in his journal claims to have been born in Bordeaux, France, child of Sephardic Jewish parents, whose converso grandmother and mother fled from Spain to France in 1765 after his maternal grandfather executed by the Inquisition for Judaism. Right? Jews were underground in Spain for a long time. They would rout them out every once in a while. He was a French pirate and privateer, operated primarily in the Gulf of Mexico. Why is he important for us? There was a dispute between the American forces and his forces, and then they came to an agreement, and he would help Andrew Jackson, General Andrew Jackson. The song of Jackson, the Battle of New Orleans, it was Jackson and the Jew Jean Lafitte. Right? Defend New Orleans from the British. After Jackson secured victory, paid tribute to the Lafitte brothers' efforts and those of their fellow privateers. Okay, see, New Orleans is in the United States. Well, actually, the battle was won after the war was over, but it's still part of the United States thanks to this Jewish pirate. General Jackson certainly had a big hand. Then we have this character. The only Jewish emperor in history, the only emperor of the United States of America, Emperor Joshua Abraham Norton. How many of you ever heard of this guy? No. He was a son of English Jews. He came to San Francisco during the gold rush, and he had family money behind him, big sum of money, $40,000, a huge sum of money those days. And he invested his money well until he invested it badly and went bankrupt completely. So when he went bankrupt, instead of collapsing, he did the opposite. He was not to be upset by a setback. So in 1859, he published a notice in the San Francisco Bulletin. At the peremptory request of a large majority of the citizens of these United States, I, Joshua Norton, formerly of Algoa Bay, Cape of Good Hope, and now for the last 9 years and 10 months past of San Francisco, California, declare and proclaim myself Emperor of these United States and Protector of Mexico, applaud Emperor Norton I. We got a lot of political candidates who did this sort of shtick, right? No, this kind of grandstanding. He soon issued his own coinage, There you go. The imperial government of Norton I promised to pay the holder a sum of $10 in the year 1880. Right? So he's running about 20 years that he's running around playing as emperor. There's his picture in his military uniform. Okay. So he issued documents of internal affairs, instructions to the public, monetary issues of the states, banknotes you saw, and collected taxes. He went down the streets of San Francisco and he asked people to pay taxes. And the people paid him taxes because they liked him. He was a character. So they would give him a dime, $1. I don't know what they gave him. When he toured the streets in his fancy military jacket, shiny sword, and peacock feathers and hat, they used to salute him. It said that when he passed away, 10,000 people lined up for his funeral. So we have to admit, San Francisco has always been a home to quite a lot of interesting people. It's not by chance that Haight-Ashbury was there in the first stop. And there's Emperor Norton. That's San Francisco. Okay, interesting people. That's Los Angeles. We can laugh at San Francisco. They laugh at us, you know that. But Jews took a major part in building the institutions of this country. Right? So here's a really serious figure, interesting, serious figure. And as I say, first American Zionist, long before Herzl, the father of Ararat. Right? I'm sorry, father of Ararat. Ararat, I'll tell you what that means. His name, Mordechai Emanuel Noah, is a journalist, is a playwright, is a politician, he's a lawyer, he's a Court of Appeals judge, is a surveyor of the New York port. He is a major in the New York military, and as I say, he's a utopian Zionist. Sheriff of New York City. Fought Tammany Hall. Tammany Hall, if you know New York politics, Tammany Hall was the political organization that controlled New York City. In the beginning, he was part of it, then he turned against it, fought against it. Editor of numerous newspapers, and chief spokesman of the Jews in the press and in public. He would give speeches about Jews, Jewish history, Jewish thoughts. He was a great promoter of the Jewish people. And very popular figure. Also showman. And early America was showmanship, P.T. Barnum. That's this kind of ethos of it, right? The Norton types, the P.T. Barnum type. No, it was more serious than the P.T. Barnum. He wasn't doing circuses, but they had this understanding of how to manipulate medium people, right? And he was a master of it. So he was the firstborn son of Emanuel Noah, an immigrant from Mannheim, Germany, served in the Revolutionary War. Tzipor Phillips, daughter of Jonas Phillips and Rebecca Machado, whose father was Chazan of the Sharit Israel congregation of New York. And very interestingly, they said, this is a period of what we call the Spanish grandees, descendants of the Spanish nobility who were Jews and laid foundations for a lot of things in American Jewish society. And because of that, Noah, who was himself primarily Ashkenazic German by background, he stressed his Sephardic identity because it gave him deeper roots in America and a more aristocratic status in the Jewish community. The Sephardic Jews were well established. Mordechai Emanuel Noah. So he also got political positions. He was appointed consul to Tunis. He was given some diplomatic stations in some places. So he was appointed to Tunis, right? Tunisia. But he was soon removed by Secretary of State Monroe. And Monroe was worried. He says, at the time of your appointment as consul to Tunis, it was not known that the religion which you profess would form an obstacle to the exercise of your consular functions. He was worried, you're sending a Jew to a Muslim country, we may get problems with it. So Noah fought back and he said, this may hereafter produce the most injurious effects, establishing a principle which will go to annihilate the most sacred rights of the citizen. You cannot deny someone a political position in the United States because of their religion. And by the way, the United States government does this by right now. And it was in terms of representation. They will send people to foreign posts. They'll send women to posts to places where women don't have rights, right? You're not going to tell us. We are the country, we determine, right? Noah's setting up this principle. So eventually, though, he and Monroe would be reconciled. So this is his book, travels to England, France, and Spain, and the Barbary States. And that is his picture on the intro of the book there against the, okay. But he's most famous for this. His most memorable act was to call for a Jewish homeland. Here's what I say, a Zionist before Zionism. So the opportunity to bring new immigrants to the young America while also creating a Jewish safe haven. He was looking at what was happening in Europe at that time. Most of the Jews had fallen under Tsarist Russia. It wasn't good. And so he purchased land on Grand Island. Those of you know Niagara Falls, if you go just further down river, you come to Grand Island. It's a good-sized island. And he would establish a Jewish colony, Ararat. Now, anybody know the name of Ararat? Remembers, rings a bell? No, the real Noah landed on Ararat. It's the safe haven. So here's Noah establishing a safe haven for Jews. And so this is inauguration ceremony held at a church in the nearby city of Buffalo. And there were not enough boats to transport the crowds of people to the island for the ceremony. That's what they did on land. And he led a jubilant procession, resplendent with prayers in Hebrew, loud music, singing, military troops, officers, clergymen, and fellow citizens. And according to the New York City newspaper, Noah was dressed in black, wearing the robes of crimson silk, trimmed with ermine, royalty, and a richly embossed gold medal suspended from the neck, lent apparently by a local park theater. Hundreds of people gathered to listen, including the Seneca chief, Red Jacket, who arrived by boat, because there were many who believed that the American Indian, the Native Americans, were actually part of the 10 lost tribes. It was a very ancient belief among Christians of this, and the Jews picked on it. And so Noah believed it. So therefore, invite Seneca, because Grand Island had formerly been part of the Seneca territory. In the speech, he proclaimed himself judge of Israel, established Ararat as a city of refuge, claimed that every Jew in the world would be taxed 3 shekels of silver in order to sustain Ararat. Also good every 4 years, Paris Jewish Consistoire, why he went to Paris Jewish, I don't know, to elect a judge of Israel after he serves his term of office. So here is the plaque. It's still sitting in Buffalo in the museum. Shema Yisrael, he puts an Ararat, city of refuge. Mordechai Emanuel Noah, his name. Did not get very far. We will admit, did not get very far. It didn't catch fire with Jews in America. Jews in America didn't feel like they needed to go to, except for Niagara Falls for a honeymoon. They had no reason to go. I don't think anybody went then to honeymoons in Niagara Falls. And also in Europe, in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which now is sitting on top of a lot of Jews, they just didn't even publicize this pronouncement. They didn't want to lose this new population. So they kept it from being publicized. So he too lost interest very soon, turned to supporting colonies in the lands of the Ottoman Empire that Europeans will begin calling Palestine, right? So he's turning to this early actual physical Zionism back, and he helped support some of these early colonies. Well, now no story of the contribution of early American Jews would be complete without Uriah Phillips Levy, really significant figure. The United States' first flag officer and then highest ranking naval officer of his day, Commodore. So during his service, and it's an interesting story because he faced a lot of anti-Semitism during his service in the Navy. He was quick to respond to insults and was court-martialed 6 times. 6 times, there we go. And demoted from rank of captain twice. And he was demoted from rank of captain twice. He was dismissed from the Navy, but he was always reinstated. He always made his case. And he was able to get his position back. Later, he commanded Mediterranean Squadron. And as squadron commander, he gained the title of Commodore, the highest position in the US Navy at that time. Here's the main claim to fame. There are 2 main claims to fame. He was instrumental in abolishing flogging in the US Navy. And it was considered controversial at that time, and he got the support of Congress to pass an anti-flogging bill in 1850. So what was controversial about abolishing flogging? Beat up your sailors, why not? Instead of flogging as a means of punishment, Levy used public humiliation to control unruly crewmen. In other words, he said, shame yourself. Demean him a little bit. His fellows would then catch on, and the guy would sort of be straightened out. The Navy favored the use of corporal punishment as a means of discipline. They determined to punish him. And so in 1842, when he started this, the Navy court ruled that Levy be dismissed for his cruel and scandalous method of punishment. It was by embarrassing a sailor in front of his fellow sailors. This is crueler than whipping. Whipping, you beat him up, he shows he's a man. However, when the verdict was forwarded to President Tyler, The president lessened the sentence to 1-year suspension and criticized the court for the punishment towards Levy. So that's it. He made the United States Navy the first in the world to abolish corporal punishment. Next thing is he restored Monticello as a national site, Jefferson's home.
Jefferson, but I'm Solomon, the revolution was a financier of the American
Revolution, yeah, but the Monticello, the site itself, to restore the site, because people have forgotten a little bit about Jefferson. And he was a great admirer of Jefferson. And he became quite wealthy, I guess, when he finished with the Navy. And he used his reputation to restore Monticello. I think he bought it, and then he helped the process of setting it up as a national monument. And so this is on a memorial to him. Commodore Uriah Phillips Levy. I am an American, a sailor, and a Jew. Beautiful. I am an American, a sailor, and a Jew. They do not contradict. Wonderful. I don't know if he could have said that anywhere else in the world before that time. So we need to ask him, add one more in passing, Levi Strauss, the father of jeans, can't miss him, right? Levi Strauss, there we go. That certainly changed fashion world. And then Judah P. Benjamin, first Jew to be elected a senator to the United States Senate without renouncing Judaism, a great honor. A noted barrister who defended escaped slaves on their rights against a lawsuit brought against him by the ship owner that had brought them to the Americas. He defended the slaves. On the other hand, but a big other hand, the only Jew to hold cabinet rank, but on the wrong side of the Union, Confederacy. He was first Attorney General, then Secretary of the Treasury, then Secretary of State. They couldn't find anybody else. In all of the South, the only Jew, and they picked him. So, by the way, about the problem of leadership in the South, it was well researched that because of the use of the slave as a mammy in raising the children of the plantation elite, they were greater soldiers, but incompetent in administration and management, and with the abilities to run a country. So Judah P. Benjamin seems did not have competition because of that. It was one of the great causes of the downfall of the South, and its continued economic downfall after that also. You got to watch who you have raise your kids, because they just wouldn't restrain them. They'd be afraid of getting in trouble with the boss. So the children grew up without any training as a result, without any discipline. These early Jews, for the most part, they were what, as I said, Stephen Birmingham titled the Grandees, right? America's Sephardic elite. And that, as I said, would pave the way for the Germans, the Yekkes, who would shape America's retail and financial system. And then comes with Emma Lazarus, the wretched refuse, the East European Jews who would come to dominate America's literature, media, and communications, and play power politics far above their weight in numbers. So eventually, this new country would discover a hitherto unknown secret, which Mark Twain reveals, who was also called the Rebbe Shalom Aleichem in one of his books, on the Jews. And we'll wrap with that. If the statistics are right, the Jews constitute but 0.25% of the human race. It suggests a nebulous puff of stardust lost in the blaze of the Milky Way. He may be influenced by John Adams' words about just a bauble in history. Right? Properly, the Jew ought to hardly be heard of, but he is heard of and has always been heard of. He's as prominent on the planet as any other people, and his importance is extravagantly out of proportion to the smallness of his bulk. His contribution to the world's list of great names in literature, science, art, music, finance, medicine, and abstruse learning are also very out of proportion to the weakness of his numbers. He's made a marvelous fight in this world in all ages, and has done it with his hands tied behind him. He could be vain of himself and be excused for it. The Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Persians rose, filled the planet with sound and splendor, then faded to dream stuff and passed away. The Greeks and the Romans followed and made a vast noise, and they were gone. Other people have sprung up and held their torch high for a time, but it burned out. They sit in twilight now and have vanished. The Jew saw them all, survived them all, and now is what he always was, exhibiting no decadence, no infirmities of age, no weakening of his parts, no slowing of his energies, no dulling of his alert but aggressive mind. All things are mortal but the Jews. All other forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret of his immortality? Right? That's quoting the National Jewish Post, 1897, and was reprinted. There we go. So that is where we leave this early American century, right, with Mark Twain's words. And as I say, we go into the first wave of Yekas and then the Russian wave. And then I realized, as I was talking with our friend Dr. Malamed here, there's a wave of Yekas that came to the United States during World War II, before and after, the aftermath, and literally blew up the world, like Einstein. And the students of Freud changed in psychology in America, social sciences, entertainment, film industry, music industry. So I may get to that one also. So, and then we have the Iranian and Russian waves, and we have a new Israeli wave. We've got lots of waves coming up. Okay, so we will wrap this up, stop screen share, go back to this and wish everybody Shabbat Shalom. And I'd like to announce also my granddaughter is graduating tomorrow officially from the University of San Diego. So we're going to be heading down there. Okay. University of California, San Diego. Okay. So, right. So to everybody, Shabbat Shalom.